The present at Ohio State and the future collide on one glorious Wednesday. It's actually literally a stock watch if Ohio State is investing in recruits because the times have changed. Welcome to the beat. It is Wednesday. It's not a true stock watch, but that's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. We can still talk plenty about the Buckeyes anyway. It's the start of the national signing period, Berm.
Yeah.
What are the cliff notes for anybody trying to catch up on what the Buckeyes are trying to accomplish at the same time that they're getting ready to play the number 2 team in the country with a Big Ten championship on the line on Saturday night?
You know what's weird is that because of the changing of the calendar, because of the way that the Ohio State seasons have ended the last 4-5 seasons without playing Michigan in 2020, without winning that game in 21 through 24, this is the first time since all of the changes to college football have happened that these things are colliding in one moment. And it does feel like it's a lot for Ohio State to have on their agenda, on their plates. Fortunately, on the recruiting side of things, this is a team that does a really good job. And when I say team, I mean Mark Pantoni and the recruiting staff doing a really great job of maintaining commitments throughout the process. Sure, there's always going to be chaos. There's always going to be a little drama. There's always going to be an ad. There's always going to be a loss. That's the way it works. But right now, Ohio State has 28 commitments as we start Saturday or Tuesday. What day is it? Wednesday morning.
It's Wednesday. Yeah.
Wednesday morning. As we start Wednesday morning, the Buckeyes have 28 commitments. That is, of course, an asterisk, provided that nothing happens in this evening on Tuesday. But I fully expect that Ohio State will lose a commitment from wide receiver Caden Dixon-Wyatt. I think the California wideout will end up staying home and playing for USC. I think he will sign with USC on Wednesday. Still a lot of buzz in the air from the Oregon side of things about Chris Henry Jr. potentially flipping and signing with Oregon on Wednesday. That would be pretty big. He's the number 1 ranked receiver in the country. Been committed to Ohio State for 3 years. Nothing has fundamentally changed at Ohio State in that time. In fact, the program has only gotten better and stronger.
Also, things are changing
Also,
in Oregon.
things are changing in Oregon with Will Stein, the offensive coordinator, moving out. I don't think Chris Henry is going to be wooed by Kentucky. But there is conversation still about West Virginia, where his father played. We saw the Mountaineers put together a major NIL package for offensive lineman Kevin Brown, who's also a Mountaineer legacy. He flipped from Penn State 2 weeks ago. They're trying to do the same thing with Chris Henry. I just don't see it happening. I still think he'll end up signing with Ohio State. Other than that, the only thing to really watch is local. If you're an Ohio State fan in the Columbus area, Olentangy High School safety Caden Gephardt, who's been committed to Clemson since March. I think there's a fairly good chance that NIL agreement, his Big Ten financial agreement, ends up coming to Ohio State and not going to the ACC on Wednesday morning. But as a class, you've got a very complete group, provided everyone signs. We don't know if everyone's going to sign on Wednesday. We don't know if people are going to sign on Thursday or Friday. That's the unfortunate reality of the signing period. But Ryan Day is going to meet with the media at noon. We're going to get 15 minutes with him to talk strictly recruiting. And we're going to get 15 to 20 minutes with Mark Pantoni to talk about things. And I know these guys are just excited to be done with this cycle because it has been an absolutely arduous one. And a reminder of how just chaotic college football is. Tuesday afternoon, the number 1 quarterback in the country flips his commitment from Georgia, where he'd been committed twice, to Vanderbilt, to Vanderbilt, to Vanderbilt, to Vanderbilt.
Oh, you're glitching.
To Vanderbilt. He flipped to Vandy. Anything can happen in college football recruiting these days, and Ohio State has done a better job than anybody in the country avoiding the 2 highs and 2 lows. And it's going to be a really great class. I think it'll end up being, let's see, if I do the math, we have 28 right now. Add 1, that's 29. Subtract 1, that's 28. So I think that's the number Ohio State will end up signing, which in my recollection is the largest high school signing class Ohio State has ever signed.
This cycle has been fascinating to follow. I'm sure it hasn't been that fun to be covering it in the thick of the weeds like you do. But for Mark Pantoni, for Ryan Day, for everybody around here who's followed, I remember vividly, especially when we had that conversation with Mark Pantoni in August during training camp. It felt like the sky was falling on Ohio State recruiting, and they didn't know what to do with their NIL packages, and everyone else was breaking the rules, and they were falling behind, and there was no way that Ohio State was going to adjust. Clearly, they have. Are they?
It might have been our conversation that was the impetus for that.
Maybe we can take credit for that if we want. I bet it doesn't have anything to do with that, and actually more to do, as we've also talked with Ross Bjork about this process, about getting clarity on what the rules are. There's still no definitive outline for how the punishments are supposed to work, but the rules of engagement have changed in a way that I don't know how much more insight either Ryan Day or Mark Pantoni will shed on that as collectives got involved, as Ohio State changed its philosophy, how much it changed its approach. Clearly it did to some form. How much is maybe difficult to actually put a number on. But this work that they've done over the last 3 or 4 months compared to the perception of it over the summer, that's as dramatic of a change as I think has occurred. Because the way it used to work, and I remember we would have this conversation 4 or 5 years ago on signing days, like, well, Texas A&M cleaned up, they dropped all these bags, Ohio State will regroup into the next cycle, they'll maybe use the transfer portal, and then a lot of these guys' relationships, they'll give it a second go when the money, when the checks don't clear at A&M, or when USC runs out of actual cash, or whatever example we want to cite. But that used to be like a year-long situation to try and adjust. This they did in real time. Yeah,
it's also just it makes them sick at times. I mean, I asked about like how this cycle in the late games that teams play, like what Oregon's doing with Chris Henry Jr., for example, how it makes these guys feel, and the answer was just numb.
Yeah,
what can you do? Like we put everything out there. The Buckeyes are very, very strict and adhering to their philosophy of how things are supposed to go and what it's supposed to look like. But at the end of the cycle, when someone just comes in and says, well, here's X amount of millions of dollars, and you've got a budget and you've got allocations and you have all of this stuff sorted out, and then some Godfather offer comes in and you don't even know where it's coming from. That's the problem, because the NCAA, they've codified some of the CSC
I think
language.
It's coming from Nike.
Probably. They've codified a lot of the CSC language, but there's also the Nike going, well, Chris Henry Jr.'s sister plays basketball at Ohio State. His brother is a highly sought after basketball recruit. Like Nike is like, oh, well, there's so many things that can be done. And I've talked in the past about it, and it's been somewhat tongue in cheek, but I don't know that I wouldn't have a conversation with Nike if I was Ohio State. Ohio State is Nike's biggest brand.
Yeah.
Bigger than Oregon.
100%. Yeah.
And so like Ohio State has some leverage to say, you guys need to stop doing this stuff, or we'll take our business somewhere else, or to the LeBron line, whatever. It's still Nike, I guess, but it is.
Not sure that's a great threat.
Whatever. You know what I mean? There's something that has to change, and Ohio State is just trying to ride the waves, and they've done a great job with it, but it is a numbing process to them. Either way, you go into signing day with a really good unheralded quarterback in Luke Fahey, who you really like. I think if Luke Fahey is 6'3" instead of 6 foot or 6.5 feet, he's probably a top 10 quarterback in the country. He is as productive as anybody, playing great football his senior year of high school. You got 2 really good, versatile running backs. If you lose Caden Dixon-White, you still sign 4 elite receivers, including Chris Henry Jr., the number 1 receiver in the country. You've got a nice developmental piece at tight end in Nick Lauder from Lebanon, who flipped from Louisville a couple weeks ago. You've got a potential borderline 5-star offensive tackle in Sam Greer. You've got a 5-star defensive lineman, defensive end, edge rusher, whatever, everything in Kari Wilder. You've got the number 1 ranked cornerback in the country, according to On3, which is what our rankings will always reflect, in Jay Timmons. So like you've got 3 players who are number 1 in the country at their position. You've got a safety that you're taking away from Baton Rouge in LSU, who lives a mile away from LSU, and his brother, Jacob Bradford, plays there with Blaine Bradford, who's one of the best safeties in the country, a guy that you see is the next evolution, not evolution, but the replacement for Caleb Downs. Like this is a very...
He's an evolution of Caleb Downs.
It's not an evolution. Whew. He is an attempted replacement. Yeah. Obviously, you don't just replace a guy like Caleb Downs, but you have a really complete class here if you're an Ohio State fan. And it's guys that every single one of them could have gone somewhere else and taken more money. And it's not to say Ohio State's being cheap. It's not to say Ohio State is not offering these kids a lot of money, because I guarantee you the deal that Ohio State has in place for Chris Henry Jr. is not asking him to come play football at Ohio State for free. Yeah. But this is a class that people are going to be proud of. They're going to really like them. Most of them, I would think probably close to 20 of them, will be on campus by the end of December. Yeah. And you're going to get to start knowing them then.
Yeah, and I think you say, they'll exhale when you get to the end of this period, throughout Friday, and they will, but the work is really only beginning there, because you still have this transfer portal cycle, and there's no...
At least you don't have to worry about that now.
No, I know, but that's step one, and part of the reason that they, you look at Ohio State in this signing class, you said to be proud of, and I think Mark Pantoni and Ryan Day and that entire staff will be, they have to cover every base, because at this point, you don't know definitively what the NFL draft decisions are going to be. And I know that that's skipping ahead to the last part of this conversation, but the other thing that is happening in this month of December that is a complication at the same time that you're dealing with, potential portal decisions and your signing class is trying to get the actual NFL draft feedback. And I know that people see mock drafts throughout the year and they take that as, well, this is the kind of feedback that Ohio State players are already getting. And you'll see 4 or 5 or 6 of them. I respect any mock draft that has Caden McDonald in the first round. I don't know that that's absolutely the way that NFL talent evaluators and scouts and general managers have told Caden McDonald at this point. And he's one guy that I would say fairly confidently, if he gets a first round grade, he will go. If he doesn't, he will take the generous offer that Ohio State will make available to him. The same is true for Kenyatta Jackson. We can go through that entire list of guys that fit into that conversation. Jermaine Matthews would be another. Max Clare would be one on offense that we could talk about. Carson Hensman, Austin Sareveld, all in that same boat. And you don't know, and you can't, it wouldn't be easy to just, count on a true freshman to step in for those guys, or even to replace them in the transfer portal. So all of this stuff about building an ideal roster, we don't know. We get, some inklings about how they might be leaning right now, but also if Kenyatta Jackson has 4 sacks against the Hoosiers on Saturday night, you can maybe throw all that out the window.
You're being forced in this era of college football to construct your roster backwards, and that is the real problem. Ohio State is signing 28 guys, hopefully, this week because they're projecting what they might lose. So you're having to replace people who haven't left. And in some ways, then, you're bound to be like, well, now you kind of have to leave because we've got a roster spot here that is now taken.
And a financial spot.
And a financial obligation. So now things just get very, very difficult. The transfer portal isn't open until January. So you hope for Ryan Day's sake that no matter what happens on Saturday against Indiana in Indiana, we believe that Ohio State will have a bye. There's 2 weeks that Ohio State's going to have to get all of these conversations finished, wrapped, answered, because they need to know by the middle of December which guys are entering the transfer portal, who's going to the NFL, what, at least as well as you can know that stuff. Obviously, you might have a Mike Conley situation where someone just destroys an NCAA playoff and then all of a sudden they have to go. But it does put these guys in a very precarious position. And it's one advantage, I think, that maybe we've spent a lot of time this year, previous years, lamenting the fact that Ohio State is having to do all this stuff while preparing for games. This year, because of the way the schedule is set up, because of the potential bye week, the Buckeyes do have a little bit of an advantage in that they might be able to get a lot of these answers now that they weren't able to get before. So
I think it's a huge deal, actually. I mean, you say a little bit of an advantage. I think it's significant.
Well, it certainly sets you up for the portal to understand what you need.
It would. If you have that part done, if then once you get to the portal opening window, if you don't have to juggle both things simultaneously, if you can get some clarity, and players can change their mind, the NFL draft guys, they're going to have the door open. So that money is going to be allocated, earmarked for them, and if they want it, they can have it. There's not a world where they're going to tell Kenyatta Jackson or Caden McDonald, no, please just go to the NFL. Right. So getting that sort of clarity, I think they'll be pretty close to that by the time, if they win or lose on Saturday against Indiana. They're going to be playing on December 31st or January 1st. All of this stuff should be done, let's say 90% by Christmas time.
Well, by the time that Ohio State lands back in Columbus after that game on December 31st or January 1st, they are going to know exactly what they need out of the transfer portal, which is a major boost over the last couple of years.
And that sort of clarity, I think, should be significant. And Ryan Day doesn't love the way that these windows line up. And in a lot of ways, Ohio State is one of the only programs that's affected by it on an annual basis. Unfortunately, that's the cost of success. That's bright lights in the big city for you by winning at the highest level. But I think the way that this particular month sets up, and it's not the same volume maybe of guys. I mentioned Jermaine, Caden, Kenyatta. Arvell Reese is not coming back. Carnell Tate is not coming back. Caleb Downs is not coming back. You can work on that. You already know that those positions have to be probably some impact in the transfer portal. We'll see if they need to go to every single one of them. You have Fahim Delane waiting at safety, for example. Maybe that's not a spot where you look. But I think that they, especially with what you described with probably not a very drama-filled, knock on wood, signing period, not an exorbitant amount of guys that are looking to leave. But if this is sewn up for them by Christmas time, then this current roster and most of the support staff gets to just focus on the team that they will play in the Rose Bowl or the Cotton Bowl and proceed from there. And it's always going to be difficult for Ohio State to manage all of that and get through the month of January. But it might be less so than a year ago when this was the most stressful building that anyone has ever been in.
Or 2 years ago when Jeremiah Smith and Edric Houston were in the middle of that. Long story short, signing period is here. And there's a lot of machinations that are happening, but it should be a relatively calm day for Ohio State with two things we're really watching. One departure, one addition, and then the waiting for Chris Henry Jr.
Yeah, so those are actual investments and more literal stocks than they could actually be. NFL scout or NFL evaluations and high school senior evaluations, which are now that's the world we live in. We're going to have a lot more coverage coming from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Wednesday. 2 press conferences on tap. Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni talking about the start of the signing period. We'll be back in the evening to hear from Ryan Day with a lightning round that should be focused primarily on Indiana and the Big Ten championship game on Saturday. It's weird to me. I feel like number 1 versus number 2, a Wednesday morning on the beat should be more focused on that game, but everything is happening all at once, and we're going to juggle as much as we can and then bring you a lot of extra content along the way. So we'll have Snap Judgments again on Wednesday night. Again, we're thinking about a Friday morning mailbag, doubling down on that, maybe 2 episodes of The Beat on Friday so we can get over to Indianapolis. So if you have questions that you want to send, we didn't get to all of them last week, but we appreciated everyone who emailed us at theaustinandbermshow@gmail.com. That's theaustinandbermshow@gmail.com. We'll dip into that on Friday as well. So send in those questions. Keep watching on 97.1 The Fan and 10 TV or 10 TV Plus if you're so inclined. If you want to listen, you can do that on any of the podcast platforms. And that's it. That's a Wednesday stock watch that's just the Berm show if we're talking about recruiting. So it's more like talking stuff.
I'm trying to figure out with Mick Walker from Letterman Row if there's an opportunity, whether it's Wednesday afternoon between the press conferences or whether it's Thursday morning after hopefully everyone is signed for talking stuff. We missed it last week because, well, it was holiday week and life gets in the way. But this is fully intentional to be end of Wednesday or early Thursday to have a talking stuff, where we will dive more into this stuff and more into the machinations and the ins and outs of what's going on, but should be relatively stress-free.
We'll see. That's a bold prediction. In fact, now we're just bringing all the shows together. Thanks for joining us on a Wednesday morning on The Beat. We'll be back in here again all day long talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. We'll see you here later.